Hello, everybody. Today I will talk about how to apply the linkage theory to practice in an institutional setting. And this online presentation is prepared by John Forth from City University and me, Van from UE Bristol. So first, let me give you some background about the linking data for better statistics. In 2017, the Office for Statistics Regulation launched an investigation how to provide a greater insights to users via the linked data. The review report, published in September 2018, identifies 6 outcomes to contribute to a safe and effective data linkage system in the UK. And the National Statistician's response in January 2019 proposes a work plan with 6 themes, and among one of them is the data documentation and the data quality assessment. And they also developed a guidance hub in January in 2019 to provide advice and links as to the best practice. For example, there is guidance for documentation framework for linked datasets suggested by Gilbert et al. In 2018, published by the Journal of Public Health. And the National Statistician's Quality Review is currently underway to ensure that methods used by the GSS are keeping pace with the changing data sources and technology. And one part of our project is to link the census to the ASHE. So ASHE is the annual survey of hours and earnings dataset. It is based on a 1% random sample of the UK employees drawn from the PAYE records. The ASHE contains rich information about the employment information, but in terms of personal characteristics, we know about age, gender, and home postcode. However, pieces of personal characteristics are available in Census. Therefore, the value of linking the Census to ASHE is to bring in data on ethnicity, religion, country of birth, education or qualification, and the language ability into ASHE to make it richer. So all the linkage activities is undertaken by owners. And how do we link the census to ASHE? The linkage is based on name, gender, date of birth, and residential postcode. So our work is echoing the recent work in the Northern Ireland. So the linking process involves many components. For example, the data cleaning, data standardization, linkage method, and clerical review. So the linkage activity usually is undertaken by specialist linkage unit. And due to some privacy concerns, data linkage is still a black box for researchers. And documentation of the linkage process and the linkage quality may be limited. It's difficult for researchers to make the judgments about the selection bias and measurement error from false negatives or false positives. So the whole linkage process usually composes 4 steps. First step is data provision. Second step is the linkage. Third step is analysis. And the fourth one is about the reporting. So the key point here is the steps on this pathway are conducted by different agencies. So, for example, different parts of ONS supply the ASHE and the census data to the linkage department in step 1, and the linkage department links two data together in step 2, and then the researcher then analyze the data and do the reporting in step 3 and 4. So basically, ONS have their own checklist for its standard linkage process, including the linkage methodology, verification metrics, validation measure, and metadata documentation. And here on your right hand side is a small part of their checklist. So what our approach here in the linkage project? So Web team is acting as critical friend, reviewer, and assisting with documentation. We actually combine the existing ONS documentation standards for the data linkage with all the best practice guidelines suggested by Deutschens and Heron 2019 and Gilbert et al. 2018 to better document the linkage strategies and the outcome. By adding the viewpoint of researcher. In practice, we have had discussions with owners to get to an agreed to-do list, and owners will provide the raw material and the web teams take the lead on documentation. So our checklist covers 5 stages of the overall linkage process. First one, preparing the dataset to be linked. Second, deciding upon the most appropriate linkage methodology. Third one, verifying the linkage variables. Fourth one, validating the linkage outcomes. And the final one is preparing the final linked dataset. Our checklist is more comprehensive than the ONS checklist. So here are 2 examples from our checklist. So we can see that we adding in ONS checklist, especially in the last 2 sections, validations and documentation. And the question is how to validate the linkage outcome. That is what is the main concern from the research side. So we can do it by identifying the false positive and the false negatives. So false negative should not arise because all persons in ASHE should appear in the census. That's what we expect. And the false positive are possible if the linkage process links to the wrong persons. It may happen through the errors in the match keys. When it happens, other common views such as the employment status, occupation, industry sector, and workplace address may help us to flag off risky cases that is worthy for further investigation and may lead to the improvement in the linkage algorithm later. Another thing we may think to do is to compare the linked and unlinked records to access the representativeness of the linked dataset and derive the weight. So what are the practical methods that we encounter? So from ONS side, it is the large machine for running the linkage and producing the statistic. And it's quite difficult for ONS to turn around to have the reinvestigation if necessary. But from the researchers, we have no access to identifiable data to do the linkage. We are limited to asking questions about the whole process, and we can't carry out our own checks on the data. So what we have done in practice is to working closely with owners to document and make a QA within the shared folder in the owner secure research service. So to make a short summary, so the ASHE and the Census linkage is being done by all of them this year, and we will try to document the whole process of the linkage as much as we can, and then we'll reflect the experience and some lessons that we learned from the project, and then we'll get back to you in September, October time on how it went in reality. And thank you so much for listening.